Well, today I'm replacing the fork seals on this 2007 CBR1000, and I've actually replaced fork seals. This is probably my 8th or ninth time, but I just haven't gotten around to filming it, and I had a bit more time on this one. So some important things you'll definitely need regardless is you're going to have a rear stand, because if you have a front stand, it'll just fall over on its side because it doesn't have the side supports. So you need to prop it up from the rear. Next thing you'll need is a front stand, but not just your everyday front stand that holds the bike up from right here. It has to go up into here and lock into that pin right here. That's where this goes. And you have to do that because you're taking out the forks, which if you have a normal front stand, usually they hold the bike up from the forks. So gotta have that. And the next thing you'll need is this fork spring compressor, and this is for most bikes. Some bikes you don't have to have for this, but specifically inverted forks for most sport bikes you do have to have that tool, along with just a range of wrenches and stuff to get to the fork and take those off and whatnot. You also will need wrench large enough to get this guy off and then break these loose as well. But yeah, this is a 2007 CBR1000. This thing is really clean. You can see it has stock levers. Most everything is stock. Excellent tires on it. Stock exhaust. I mean, this thing is clean. And you can tell that the forks have never been out before. These are all lined up, and they were in the stock setting and position and everything. And you can see that the actual seals themselves have cracks on the rubber. It's kind of hard to see, but that probably means that they're actually OEM seals, because these are definitely very old when you see cracks in the rubber like that. So they're definitely, this left one is still holding fine, but the right one gave out. Another really important thing, and I can't stress this enough, but you really need to have the service manual for the bike that you're working on, for a couple reasons. And one is, once you put the fork back together, you have to know how much oil to fill it up for, and just a lot of other little details that I'll probably forget to tell you in this video, and how to do the fork seal change, because they pretty much go through and tell you step by step how to do everything. So there's a lot of important information and stuff in here, and just where all the parts go and what kind of oil you need. And generally the rule is, for something like a 1000, you'll need 10 weight oil. And it's different for every bike, so definitely look it up in the service manual, or go to your local parts store for motorcycles and see what they recommend. They should be able to look it up. For this CBR1000, it uses a 10 weight, which they happen to have, about not a quart, I guess this is 16 fluid ounces. So I got 2 of these, and this is the second CBR1000 I've done today, actually. And so now I didn't fully disassemble the entire fork and take out the lower adjuster at the bottom and take out the bolt from the bottom and do the entire thing, depending on the fork. I usually don't go through that process, because usually the customer doesn't order the correct copper seals that you need to replace when you take out those. And but yeah, for this bike it takes a 10 weight oil, and then for my R6 it actually took a 5 weight, which was a little hard to find because it doesn't specifically say in the service manual what weight to use. It just gives the kind of oil, which is like a Showa brand. But yeah, you can sometimes cheap out on this stuff and just get like really basic oil. I mean, this stuff is pretty cheap. It was like $8 or $9 for each one of these bottles. And I always like to use OEM fork seals. The ones that I pulled out of the CBR1000 I did earlier today were all balls, and they actually failed within a few weeks of me putting them in. And I know I put them in right. Now, the owner was wheeling very hard and came down way too hard on some of those wheelies, and that might be the reason why they failed. But those all balls fork seals are a few weeks old, and they gave out. So I'm not really dissing All Balls brand. I've also put them in on a GSXR 1000. They were fine, so I guess it just depends on the bike. But OEM is usually around 20 to 40 bucks, which is pretty damn cheap. I know these are OEM Honda, and they were like a total of 30 bucks, which is really cheap. So I mean, might as well get OEM. If these on this 2007 CBR1000 lasted until 2019, then it's probably a safe bet that they are pretty decent seals. But yeah, I'll do my best to go through and just kind of show you how to do it on this bike. like I said, is different for every bike. And I would definitely recommend try and find the service manual if you have an older bike. It has a lot of really important information of the oil level and how to do the entire process pretty much, and how to torque everything down to the right specs and everything like that. What I forgot to mention is you really could use one of these, which is a fork seal driver, to get the fork seals in. And this has some weight to it, and it's the exact right size that I need for this bike, and so you'll see how this works so well. But if you don't have like one of these, which I didn't have for the R6 when I did it, you can actually just use PVC pipe. You got to be really careful. Sometimes you have to cut the pipe in two to have it wide enough to last, and then you have to put the PVC on either side of the seal, and then put a block of wood on top of that, and then gently hammer it down, because it does the same process as this. And make sure the end of the PVC doesn't have any burrs or sharp points, and you sand that down before you put that on the seal and drive it in. Otherwise you can ruin it. You got to be really careful that you have a really clean surface and you're not putting too much pressure or anything. Also, another thing on forks, some of them, like my Yamaha, I actually had to heat them up to get the fork seals out. They were really tight in there and I couldn't just pop them out. On these Hondas you actually kind of ram them out, but on some bikes like the GSXRs and the Yamahas that I've done, you actually have to just pop them out with a flat blade screwdriver. And so it really just depends on the bike, but it sometimes really helps to just actually, as silly as it sounds, is once you have the fork out and you have just the tube with the seals in them, you can actually put your oven at like 200 degrees and then stick the end with the fork seals in there and warm them up a bit. You don't have to get them to 200 degrees or really hot, but just warm them up a bit and then pull them out and gently pry on those seals again, and sometimes they'll pop right out or be a lot easier to come out. The last Honda CBR1000 I did earlier today, I didn't have to do that. For these Hondas, you yank them out, and you'll see what I'm talking about later, but that's how they come out, so you don't necessarily have to heat them up for them to come out. First, we got to take the forks out. Now, if you have the service manual, you can just kind of walk through and they'll tell you how to do it. On this particular bike, we're going to be breaking loose these two bolts right here on either side, and then these two down there. That'll come later. First of all, we have to take out all this stuff from here. So it'll be this bolt, this bolt, this bolt, and then I take out this one, and I'm able to take off this plastic piece. Then after you get that off of both sides, you can take out these two bolts, take off the brake caliper. Next, you start with these two, unscrew them, then break this loose, take it out, go to this side, take these two out after doing this side with everything. And then once you have those two out, you can go up under here and put your front stand up there, and then gently tap it out of this pin right here. Pull that out, pull the front tire out, and then you can start on the 8 bolts on these on the forks up top. 8 mil right here. $5mm key. Break these loose. Yeah, this is a clean bike. It's a little dirty because of these leaking fork seals, but this is a solid bike. This side's a little weird. It's actually a 10 mil up here. Just gonna gently walk these brake calipers off and don't let them jerk down or anything. Just kind of gently let them down. This guy pops off. Now's a great time to check your brake pads. These look really good. Got plenty of life left in them. Next, we'll break these two loose. See, I can tell this stuff has not been messed with a lot, and whoever changed the front tire last or put on new brake pads didn't over tighten anything and screw anything up. The brake calipers aren't over tightened on. It's just, you can tell someone has been taking care of this bike. I love seeing that. A lot of people over tighten this, and it only needs to be tightened to, like, I think it's like around 30 foot-pounds, which isn't that tight, unlike the rear, which is around 80 foot-pounds. A little too tight on that side. Yeah, it's a little too tight. Not bad though. Alright, got everything off right here, so I'm about ready to get this lifted up. Gently tap this out. I just kind of reached under and supported it, tapped it out an inch, and then just grabbed it from this side, wiggled, and supported it, wiggled it out, came right out. This is a damn good tire too. Be careful not to have these guys fall out, which I believe one of them did fall out. Maybe not. No. That's weird. All the way stuck in here. Yeah. Just got it right in here again. Alright, got this guy out. Now it's those two bolts. Honestly, I actually like to start with these two up top. Once you get these two up top, you can actually break this loose while it's on the bike. That way you don't have to struggle with it when it's off the bike. And then break this big nut right here loose, and then come down and take off those two, and then you can take out one fork and work on it at a time, or you can take them both out first. It's just kind of user preference. Those two bolts loose. After that, I just grabbed my big old wrench over there and broke this loose. I did just a half a turn to make sure I could manhandle it when I get it off the bike. And then I believe, it's kind of odd, but these down here are 10 mils. We'll start with those. Gently pop that out. Lay the lever over here. These have these rings around here. I just like to leave them where they were, about right here. Not worry about them. I kind of differentiate how far up the lever goes or something like that. This is the leaky seal. We'll start with it probably first, and I'm gonna bring the other one over here. It's the same sort of thing though. We're to this part. This is a little messy. I really recommend just putting down a trash bag to let some of the oil fall on that. You'll need like a little bucket to put the old oil in and some of the parts into as well. I also like to have a little table kind of this high. That way I can look in when I'm filling them up and just have a space to work on. I've got my oil. You can check how much you'll need in your service manual. I've got some red grease right here. I've got some very fine grit sandpaper, which is essential for this job. I'll show you later, but pretty much we're gonna we're gonna soften up or clean up any burrs that are on the surface from bugs and rocks that kind of kicked up and hit that area, just so the seal has a good surface all the way up and down that. We got our fork seals, of course. We've got lots of clean blue shop towels. We've got brake cleaner. We've got the new oil. We've got some wrenches. We've got some flatheads. This is actually what I use to tell the level of oil inside of it. You can really use anything. So when this touches, you can see it touch the oil at the bottom, and this line is at the top. That's 3.5 inches for this bike. It's 3.5 inches once I fill it, and I'll show you how to do that later. I like to have a needle nose, then I like to have this to screw up and down on there. And yeah. Alright, first things first with these. And this is a little tricky because I hate scratching this sticker on the top. It's a poor design by Honda, but I'm trying to get this little pin off right here. It's a little tough to get off. I like to press down on this black plastic piece. Also, this can pop off and go somewhere you don't want it, so put a finger on the edge to where it doesn't fly everywhere. Then grab that and lay it off to the side. Then pop this off, because we will need to get to that. You see how this is right here? You can even mark it. I kind of know why it's there. I'll explain, but we're going to want to go ahead and back these all the way out, which I already did. And then you can screw them in, and generally this little notch is lined up with that, so this is fully out, unscrewed, or so. And then screwing it in, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, about 4 rotations. Now it's different for every bike, and it usually will tell you how many rotations in the service manual, but we know it's 4 on this one, so I'm going to actually go ahead and back this all the way out. And leave it there. And remember that it takes 4 rotations for it to stop at the bottom. And I know this hasn't been opened up before. It definitely has an OEM seal, so I'm going to pop that off, because we want that to line up whenever we're done right there. Pop that off, lay it to the side, and then we can start unscrewing this. That down. This tool has a hole at the bottom that lines up with the hole at the bottom of the fork. You pop that in. Then you line these two things up. You'll have to go down a little bit. Carefully. Some bikes are different. I don't have to go all the way down with this. And this kind of wobbles back and forth, so be sure to control that. Then this pops out, and we're trying to unscrew this. This lower one is a 14 mil. I don't know why I knew that. You see, that wasn't that tight at all. It really shouldn't be that tight. And then this just unscrews. Just set that in my bucket over here. Get the spring out. There's a lot of oil in here, so if you pull this out really quick, there's going to be oil that drips out everywhere, so be careful. Pull this out slowly. I like to kind of shake it a bit and then just set it off over here. See that red oil? It's OEM oil, just like we got over here. And you can cycle the rod up and down to get some of the excess oil out from under inside of here. Now, like I said before, I'm not taking out this bolt and I'm not unscrewing this because there are seals in there that generally you're supposed to replace if you're doing this. So I'm just replacing the seals on here, and I'm not going to go all the way in depth. So there is some oil trapped up inside of there that in general it's best to get out, but it's not a huge deal if you leave it in. Especially if you don't have the copper seals to replace those, just leave them in and worry about the seals down here. You're doing it justice just by replacing most of the oil in here. But yeah, next process, we're gonna take out the dust seal, then the clip that's behind the dust seal. You want to be careful not to scratch this surface. It needs to be very smooth, so be careful when you're popping this out. So I got that off, and then there's a clip inside of here that we got to get out too. You can kind of pull it further back so you're not going to damage the surface that the seals will be on. And just like that, comes off. So once you have these two things out, I don't like this part on this particular Honda. This is how they have you take it out. Normally this cylinder just slides off on the Yamaha and GSXRs. On this one, it even says in the service manual to do this, is you tap it back and forth until it pops out. And it's kind of scary to do it because you feel like you're gonna break something, but that's what they say to do on this. Alright. That was pretty damn hard to do. These were definitely really stuck in here. That's why I don't really like the Hondas on these. I think they can be designed better a bit because it just feels like you're breaking it. Next, take a very thin screwdriver like this. You're gonna want to take these two off. Look for the line on this one. Just in case these are in a specific order or location, I like to take them out and set them directly up. That way when I put them back, I know what direction they go in. So I took off that one first, and you can look at the service manual if you forget which order they go in. And a tip on this guy, the flat edge goes towards the seal. Alright, now what we'll use is sandpaper for, so we're going to clean up all this oil and dirt and debris that's gotten on here with some clean rags and brake cleaner and stuff. Clean all of this oil off, get this nice and clean, then we'll come back with the sandpaper. It needs to be like a 1000 grit or higher, preferably like 12,000 or higher. The higher the number, the thinner the grit. You do not want to use something really aggressive, otherwise you'll scratch this. You don't want that. You can see this is really fine, and we don't want any grit or dirt, so this is one I've already used. My hands are really dirty right now. I'll use a new one, and I'll put a little bit of new oil on here, and in case any rocks or bugs have dented or dinged this, I'll clean those out and smooth it out before I put all these new seals and everything. That could have been the first place that caused it to fail, is dust got up under there because there's little dents or dings. And then I'll clean this really thoroughly, sand it, and then we'll go from there. Alright, I got most of the dirt and stuff from this side. I'm trying to clean up this edge right here and just go through and make sure I got all this really clean, and then I'll go from there. I like to wash my hands, and then I'll get some of the sandpaper, which is 1500 grit. Get some of this oil and just put a dab of oil, and then just kind of sand that on, and sand kind of this way, and just sand from here to there. Get any little burrs or little nicks, and you can feel with your finger if there's any. There's a little one right there and a little one over here, and just get those little dings out. These forks look actually really good, so probably just one sanding is good enough. I'm just gonna put some brake cleaner on this and clean this whole shaft again, and then go from there. If you're gonna see any little dents or dings, it'll be on this side. It's facing where the bike is going. Like I said, this looks really clean. There's no dents or dings that I can even see or feel. So yeah, this one's pretty clean. It's pretty much good to go. And I'll show you what to do next. So we're gonna grab our new seals. If this was really dirty or anything, or you had a lot more gunk, maybe wash your hands again. This one is pretty clean before I started, so I'm gonna go for it. Yeah, first things first. Oh, those are just the seals. I always like to compare these to the original ones, make sure they're similar in size and whatnot. These do look a little bit different, so I'm wondering if they're a newer Honda version of them. Hopefully he ordered the parts I told him to order. And these are pretty clean. Sometimes these have like this powdery substance on them, but these look pretty good. Just gonna take a little bit of oil and dab it on here. Gently pop it on. A bit of pain. Just getting over this lip. These seals feel good though, nice and tight. At least the dust seals. You can put a little bit more oil around this shaft to just kind of lubricate things. In the service manual on this edge is a little bit sharp, so they say to put a piece of tape around it before you put the seal on it. And then on the seals, make sure they're nice and clean. I like to put a little coat of red grease around here. Oil. Yeah. That's all that. This lip, the lip that faces on the inside coming out, this goes onto it like this. I forgot to do something. I'll have to take this off, but we need this ring first, so I'm going to pull this off, put this on. I like to pop that on up here, that way it doesn't drop down later when we're trying to put the rest of this stuff on. Slide this down a little further. Next, and depending on how these look, if you see any really rough spots on these, you can get the same sandpaper and just kind of get those out. If they're really dirty too, you want to wipe them down and clean them and put some more new oil on them before you put them on. These are pretty clean though. Don't forget the edge, the flat edge goes towards the seal. Next is this guy. Remember, I took these off like this, so I know exactly how to put them back on. good to put a little oil on this one before we put it on. Next is to clean this shaft up around the edge and on the bottom. I like to put a little touch of grease and oil on the inside of this. Oh, what? See how this table comes in handy. This clip is kind of attached to the dust seal right there, very loosely, and then I've got a pretty straight path on here. Then I'll use this guy, makes it a lot easier instead of using PVC. Again, the fork seal is actually going to be around here, and I put some oil around here, and I made sure this is really clean. But generally you don't want to slide any piece of metal on this, but it's not a huge deal because our fork seals aren't going to be anywhere near there. And this is clean, and I have some oil on it, so I'm just going to reel gently, and you'll see it go down, and you can hear it kind of bottoms out around there. And you can look at, when you pull this apart, look where that seal is to begin with. That way you have a reference when you're putting back in. And I can tell that one's bottomed out, so it's good to go. It didn't need any heat or anything. Next we're going to put this clip down in there, pop it in. It felt a lot tighter than I've ever had a dust seal be, so I'm a little skeptical. I'm wondering if this is the right kit. The oil seal went in fine. It's a little sketchy that that thing was so tight, but maybe that's good. Maybe it's a newer version of Honda's stuff, because I know I told him to order the right one. So, oh well. I went in, so I'm not too worried about it. Now is the time when we're going to put some oil in here. So pretty much on these, I like to start with about putting in most of the bottle with this one, and make sure you've done everything. And sometimes there's a washer in these. On this one there isn't though. Just going to pour in most of this oil. Worst case scenario, if you overfill it, you can always drain some out. So once you put in the oil, you're going to cycle this. Sometimes oil kind of squirts out, so just be careful. You're just going to cycle this about 10 to 20 times until it feels linear in the movement to get all those air bubbles out. Takes a while to do this. Just take your time. You'll kind of know when it's right. This one's close. It's almost done. Yeah, it's about good. Go all the way to the bottom. Keep pushing until it bottoms out. I can see I'm pretty low, and so I get a flashlight, I hold it over this. I already measured 3.5 inches, so I'll stick this gently down, and then when I see the tip of this touch the oil, I stop, and then I look at how this relates to the top of this. And so I'm just gonna get a flashlight. That's perfect. So right up 3.5 inches, I believe 90 millimeters from the top, from the oil level to the top. It's good to go. Get our spring back in here. Just gently set that back in. Next, we're gonna put in this guy. Compress it back down. Make sure to not bind this up on that piece under here. Then you need to very carefully reach down with some needle nose. Very carefully grab it gently, pull it slowly back up. Hey, hi. Oh, hurt that. And generally, you want to wipe this down. This one was really clean, and before I screw it on, I'll wipe it down just a bit. Then I'll put a really thin layer of grease right there. Now remember how our preload was 4 rotations out, so I'm going to go 4 rotations in So I'm going to go all the way out like I left it. So that's fully unscrewed. And then where that dot is, I'm going to do 4 rotations in. 1, 2, 3, 4, right there. Once it's at 4, I can start screwing it on. Then once I feel it bottoming out, stop. Don't force it down. I'm going to check to make sure I can't screw this on anymore. And it's tight. Then I'm going to tighten this nut down there. You just tighten this a little more than snug. It does not have to be that tight. Now when I first pulled this off, it was, I believe, 1 full rotation down, maybe 2. It depends on the rider. The rider right now is a little heavier than me, probably around 200 pounds, and he might be 160, 170 within the next couple months. So I'm probably going to leave it at 1 full rotation in. So check to make sure it doesn't screw in any further. And 1, 2, 3, 4, stop. And it stops right there, so that's perfect. That's how we want it. So we're gonna go 1 rotation in. And that's pretty much it. Screw this carefully. Now like that. Like that. Oh, okay. A little oil. Make sure you didn't miss any parts you're putting in. We can't really tighten this as is, so we'll wait until we put it back on the bike, and we'll tighten the lower 2 bolts that clamp it right here. Then we'll tighten this. Then we'll tighten the top 2 bolts. And remember, this little notch was right. Actually. This playlist is on shuffle. I have no idea what's playing right now. This one is good to go. Same thing applies to this fork. It's the exact same. Just make sure and do all the process like I said for the last one. Then once that one is done, I probably won't go through and how to put everything back together. It's pretty straightforward. When you put this guy back in, this seam actually holds it back from going further up, and I believe it'll stop right about there. So right where my fingernail is will be at this ledge. And then make sure this pin gets popped up in and the wires are routed correctly. And then look in your service manual as far as how to torque everything and how tight to get those torqued. That's very important. And don't press your brake lever. Don't touch that until you put your calipers back on and get everything tightened up. And just follow the service manual how to put this all back together. Pretty much the reverse order of how I took it all apart. And then once you're done with that, make sure your forks are adjusted at the same preload on the top, and that you know, just depending on the rider. Basically screwing it in is going to give it a harder ride, and unscrewing it from here is going to give it a softer ride. So it just depends on how and what the rider wants. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Just make sure you clean that really good. Use the sandpaper and it should be good to go. You'll fix your forks and save a lot of money doing it. You just have to have the right tools. But yeah, thanks for watching, and comment if you have any questions. And this process is different for every bike. For the R6, it was pretty different. It was actually easier on the R6 than it was on this bike, for a couple different reasons. And then GSXRs are also a little more easier than this. You don't have to ram out those seals. But yeah, follow the service manual and just put everything back on correctly and torque it down to the right specs, and you should be good. Thanks for watching.